Welcome, everyone, to the UMass Amherst Annual Guggenheim Workshop. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. I'm Associate Provost for Faculty Development, Angela De Oliveira. The Office of Faculty Development is excited to collaborate with the Office of Foundation Relations in offering information and advice about applying for the Guggenheim Fellowship. We hope that you leave this workshop with a clearer understanding of the process, evaluation criteria, and advice as you consider your fellowship application. OFD is happy to welcome faculty from all 5 colleges to this event and others as we host on publishing and research. Our office seeks to provide community and connection both on campus and across the 5 colleges. Thank you, Layla. Thank you to Office of Faculty Development Director Layla Kia Hamid and Executive Director of Foundation Relations Marco Monak for organizing this workshop. Please reach out to Marco with any follow-up questions and for help in developing your proposals. Marco, would you mind briefly outlining how your office assists with the proposal development and submission process?
Yes, Angela, I'm happy to do it. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. So if you've ventured into the Guggenheim website, you will note that the application process is a multifaceted one with many different components that happen over the course of time. And that the foundation is really quite punctilious about the way you respond to their various questions. And I've been fortunate over the past several years to have been the recipient of information that was shared with us by Andre Bernard, who was the long-serving vice president of the Guggenheim Foundation and who had been doing this work literally for decades. And so having benefited from his wisdom, I and my colleagues in Foundation Relations, Rebecca Feinberg has joined the call as well, would be happy to look over your proposal to make sure that it aligns with all of the priorities of the foundation, because again, they're really very unique in many ways. And so please do make an effort to reach out to us. I think you'll be happy you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I'd now like to pass it over to our UMass Amherst Interim Provost Mike Malone, who will introduce our panelists. Mike?
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Marco. We regret that Andre Bernard, the Guggenheim Foundation's long-serving vice president and secretary, can't join us this year, as he has done in the past. Mr. Bernard announced his retirement from the foundation, and we're extremely grateful for the valuable insights he's provided over the years, and send him our best wishes on his retirement. So we'll try to engage with his successor as we prepare for our 2025 workshop. I'm happy to be here to say a few words about the fellowship and to welcome 3 former awardees from the 5 colleges who've been generous enough to join us this morning. The John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship was established nearly a century ago and is among the most prestigious awards a scholar, scientist, or artist can receive. It's awarded to recognize the significance of past accomplishments and to underwrite exceptional promise. With it, individuals join the ranks of historical changemakers such as Rachel Carson, James Baldwin, and Martha Graham. This year, 188 fellowships were awarded to individuals in 52 fields. Over the years, there have been several awardees from UMass Amherst and the 5 colleges, and it's my great pleasure to introduce 3 esteemed past recipients of the Guggenheim Fellowship. They've graciously agreed to share their knowledge of the process and their own experience, and I'll introduce them in the order of the years they were awarded, beginning with the most recent. Fellows, if you could raise your hand as I say your name so our audience can identify you, although I see that your names are printed on the screen. The first is Gretchen Holbrook-Brezina, who is the Paul Murray Kendall Chair in Biography and Professor of English at UMass Amherst. She served for 5 years as Dean of Commonwealth Honors College at UMass. She has authored 9 books and is working on number 10. Several of these books are pioneering studies of Black Britain, including the recently reissued Black England. Professor Grzina was awarded a Guggenheim last year in the field of intellectual and cultural history. That same year, she received the Samuel F. Conti Faculty Fellowship from UMass Amherst. and was offered a Harvard Radcliffe Institute Fellowship. Welcome, Gretchen. Sabina Murray, professor of English at UMass Amherst, was awarded a Guggenheim in 2007 in the field of fiction. Professor Murray is the author of 8 books of fiction, including the novel Valiant Gentleman, a New York Times and Washington Post notable book, The Caprices, a Penn Faulkner Award winner, and most recently a collection of stories called Muckross Abbey. Also a screenwriter, she wrote the script for Beautiful Country, an Independent Spirit Award finalist, developing the story with Terrence Malick. Thank you for being here, Sabina. Maria Heim is the George Lyman Crosby 1896 and Stanley Warfield Crosby Professor in Religion and Chair of Religion at Amherst College. Professor Heim's research and teaching is on the intellectual, philosophical, religious, and literary history of ancient India. Her latest book is Words for the Heart, a treasury of emotions from classical India. She also has 2 books forthcoming, including How to Lose Yourself, an ancient guide to letting go, and The Questions of Melinda, a translation of an ancient dialogue between a Greek king and a Buddhist monk. She was awarded a Guggenheim in 2005 in the field of religion. Thank you for being here, Maria, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Provost Malone. Next, our esteemed Guggenheim Fellows will share their perspectives and advice on the Guggenheim application process. Panelists will have about 5 minutes each, and then we'll take questions after hearing from all of the panelists. We'll start with our most recently awarded fellow again, Gretchen.
Thank you. First of all, I've got to say that it was one of the most exciting things to start getting emails from Guggenheim that suggested I was on the right path and it might happen. And I was trying to think of advice for people. And I came up with 3 things that I would personally advise. The first is, 1, believe in your project and in your ability to do it. Guggenheim doesn't award just for the project. It's really on, they're looking for somebody who's actually demonstrated some expertise, but they're also looking for great promise. One of the first things they said to me was, if you don't know all the people in the room, meaning all the people who were just being awarded it and having a wonderful time at a cocktail party, you will know their names in the future. And that, I think, is one of the things they look for. So you believe in yourself and in your project. You don't have to have struggled through writing 9 books like I did. And you don't have to be at the very beginning of your career either. So those are the first thing, is believe in your project. The second thing was, and this was a hard one for me, don't give up. I applied 4 times over my career. I think each time with the same project. I may have learned more about the project and what I wanted to do and found more information, published more in between. But I really believed that this was something that was going to happen, and I didn't win the Guggenheim and I didn't win other things. But don't give up. I was about to give up when 2 people I knew had been awarded them from other institutions. And someone at the meeting said, you have to apply again. And I said, I don't know if I've got it in me. And they said, just do it. And lo and behold, it was my time. I was told by, I think it was Andre Bernard himself, that some people apply 8 times, sometimes even more. So don't think if you applied and you didn't get somewhere that this is something to give up on. You just, keep applying. You'll always have more to say or more to add or more belief in your project if you keep saying this is worth doing. So not only did I win, as Mike said, but it was the right time. It was the right time, because then all 3 places I had applied for awarded me the fellowships in the same year. I didn't know what to do. I think I laughed for about a week and then I cried a whole lot because I was kind of not sure how to take all this. So that was my second thing, is first, don't give up, believe in your project. Second is really don't give up and keep trying. And the third thing, and this is something that I had been told from the very first time I applied, which was decades ago, get the right people to write for you. Your project, your application, that's really important. That's crucial. But it's also crucial whom you get to speak for you and your ability to do this project. And the first person I asked many decades ago said, get the most famous people you can. Now, I don't know if that's the right advice, because the most famous people you can get might write you a kind of middling 2-paragraph recommendation that you can't use, because it's clear they don't really know you and they don't know you well enough to talk about your project in some intimate detail that shows their belief. But they also said to me, don't just get people from your department to be writing for you. What you want to show them is that you are somebody to be reckoned with in your field, whatever you've declared your field to be, and that people recognize that there is promise, ability, success in what you have to offer, and that people who are in that field, who are well known in that field, recognize you. That's really important to Guggenheim. They want to know that you're not just locally known, but that people are taking notice of you and are willing to write about your project. So you don't have to, get the most famous person who's ever met you at a conference to write you a letter, but you do want to get people who can speak to your project as a fellow participant in that field in a way that's recognized by the field. And I don't know if Marco would agree with that, but I think that's the advice I was given. And I finally just pulled out the stops because I was embarrassed about asking people, would you write for me again? And I just finally said, I'm going for the top, and I'm going to go with people I know who know my work and who can speak for me. And I don't know if that's what clinched it or they just gave me the award for tenacity. I don't know, but I'm thrilled. And in fact, I'm about to start it because they allow you to postpone it. So because I got the Conti, I was able to start the Guggenheim starting in June. So this is a double joy.
Thank you so much. Marco, do you want to chime in on the recommendation letters?
Yes, well, you can have up to 4 recommendation letters. One thing that Andre said rather humorously over the years, but with great seriousness as well, was the fact that he said it was very important to get, first of all, references who will speak well of you. He said you would be surprised by the number of people who list references who end up not speaking very highly of them at the end of the day. So this is something to keep in mind, right? Make sure that that you do reach out to those people. I wholly agree with what Gretchen said about um, finding those people who have a name in your field, who know your work well, right? Who can speak to your most recent publications or work, whatever your discipline might be, um, and but who can also speak about your career as a whole, right? So that these wouldn't be recent acquaintances or casual acquaintances, as Gretchen said. Yes, I do agree that the more luminaries in your field that you're able to get, the better. But again, those individuals should really be able to speak knowledgeably about your work and especially about your project, your proposed project, and equally so about your career thus far.
Sabina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. I was trying to go back to that time where I was applying for this, and I applied. I think I got it on my 3rd time, and I actually have pretty clear recollections of what my other applications were like. Gretchen talked about time. It's the right time for you. I'm a fiction writer. I really have to think about the fact that when I'm writing something, I'm just thinking in an art mode. But when I'm writing an application, it's an application that's going to go to a number of people who might not think about fiction in the same way that I do, who might not approach a book with the same material research concerns and project outlines and kind of nerdy stuff that's landed me very happily in academia. When I write my proposals, I think this is not going to go to, you know, my favorite fiction writer who's waiting for my next novel. This is going to go to someone who might be suspicious of my ability to accomplish material work that is for a broad readership, and that might have some kind of scholarly potential. So the project that I actually got the Guggenheim with was a massive research project. It was a book about Roger Casement. It's a one that, you know, whatever, was a New York Times best book. And I think that a lot of that had to do with I had so much research to do. And it also dealt with so many different themes. It dealt with colonialism, it dealt with slavery, it dealt with the First World War, it dealt with, you know, a gay icon who had been hanged for his Irish nationalism. It had a lot of material concerns. And so that was the project that I was able to really put on a page in a way that said, please support this novel. So I think that's important to really think about your project in the way other people might think about it. The other thing is, you know, in terms of time, which is something that Gretchen brought up, like, what is the time for you as a scholar, as a writer? Are you going to finish the project? Is the Guggenheim going to push you through a specific marker for research? Is it going to get the book done? That kind of stuff just makes the proposal easier to write in a concrete way. So I thought about that. Also, why now for you in your career? Is this going to make you break out in a particular way now? Because I think at the Guggenheim, they really expect you to apply over and over. And they're saying, okay, now, you know, they think you're going to apply again next year. So why aren't they going to kick that can down the road? Argue for this particular moment for yourself. And for the subject matter in the greater world. That's another now that people have to think about. And also the evidence that you're the particular person to write the project. Because it's surprising, you know, we all have these great ideas, these great moments. Somebody else might be writing the same type of proposal, or it might fall into the same category. So you do have to sell yourself as a particular person who can get it done. And also, when you're writing your proposal, have people who aren't in your field read it, because eventually it's going to end up on someone's table who doesn't know what you do. I mean, when you get to a certain level, there's going to be a group of people saying, you know, apples and oranges. So you have to have somebody who has looked at your project and said, I have no idea what you mean by the positioning of the narrator and the handling of time. That's completely irrelevant to any way that I read. Fix it. So I think that can be helpful depending on what project you're doing. And definitely with the recommenders, you want heavy hitters. You also want people who know you, but also who can argue to why this is the right time for you. And I would suggest that if you know your letter writers well, ask them to speak to that, the now in this proposal and the importance in the now of this proposal. And I really think that's when I compare my less successful submissions with the one that actually got the Guggenheim, I can boil it down to there was a lot of stuff that a lot of people could say was interesting in it, who might not be interested in, you know, playing with language and treatment of time. They could say this subject matter is interesting. It was at a point in my career it was going to make a huge difference. And I was close enough, I was deep enough into the research that I knew enough about the subject matter that I could say, yes, I will finish this within 2 years. And I think that helped me. That's it.
Thank you. Maria?
Hi, everybody. I'm Maria Hyman. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I also just want to say I really agree with everything Gretchen and Sabina have already said, especially this last point about timing in terms of being able to make the case that you've got a very concrete conception of your project and a schedule in mind, and that you're going to bring it to completion, or you're going to make a significant jump into it with the Guggenheim year or semester. I got a Guggenheim in 2006 to 2005, 2006. So I think we're talking about 20 years ago. So I'm reaching back into trying to think about the circumstances of that. But for me, I was a junior person, and I still remember the year that our college president brought all of us in my cohort into the room and said, we aren't going to have enough money because there's too many of you this year to support all of your junior sabbaticals. So everyone has to go out and get grants to kind of spread it, to support some of you so others could get it. And so I wouldn't have thought, I was pretty young in my career, I wouldn't have thought I would have had a chance to get the Guggenheim, but I applied and I got it as a junior person, and in ways that wound up being really, really quite formative and important for me. I do agree, though, that with Gretchen, that you should apply multiple times. So when I've sat on some of these forums before and I've talked with others, we all know, often many of us have now served on fellowship committees on the other side of it. And you always see that there's a fair number of people up at the top that, you know, easily swing either way among those people. And so sometimes it's just hammering along year after year to be to eventually be in that smaller group that they can actually give the fellowship to. So don't give up, just keep hammering away. And as you go along, probably your project will become more crisp and more further developed in ways that I think will help. In terms of, I would also just say, I don't have much else to add to what's been said, but I would just say, in terms of writing the statement of your project, one thing I think is pretty important is to try to emphasize as much as possible a writing style that is accessible. So I work in ancient India. I work in two languages, Sanskrit and Pali. I work in, my project that I submitted for the Guggenheim was an area of Theravada Buddhist philosophy, working on a 5th century figure in terms of how he articulates moral agency and moral psychology. So I was trained as a graduate student to learn how to expect people's eyes to glaze over within the first 30 seconds of talking about what it is I do, because they think they're not going to understand it. And to learn very quickly how to articulate it so that people feel like it's accessible to them, that they have a stake in it, that this is maybe ways that it's intersecting with, but also departing significantly from basic presuppositions of the modern West. And so I had that training of, like, how do you take out the jargon? How do you reduce some of the maybe some of the philosophical terms that you're using in ways that people see that they might have a stake in it and can understand it. So that, you know, and then circulating it, I think Sabina's point, circulating it with people who are not specialists in your field to see it, are all really sort of good ideas, so that it's accessible and it seems to be important to folks. And then the other thing I would say is have a very concrete plan that's, you know, shows exactly how you're going to spend the Guggenheim time, exactly when the book is going to come out, exactly when, how you're going to use the time and the research, you know, if you're going to go abroad or you're going to check out some archives or you're going to study with particular people. I think having a sense of when I've sat on fellowship committees, things that are too vague, too general, too in the beginning, doesn't serve people very well. I think you want to have something pretty tight when it comes to that. So happy to take questions as you have them.
Muted. Okay, thank you, Maria. Before we open up the floor to questions, Marco, do you have any additional insights to add?
No, I just one actually that comes to mind, and that is that Andre had frequently talked about, as Gretchen rightly mentioned, the importance of being really willing to go through this over and over again, right? I mean, I think he mentioned that there was someone who had applied for this close to 20 times. I think the number might have been 18, and he eventually got it. So, the stick-to-itiveness is really, there's something to be said for it. And then there are others, and he did note that it's really quite rare for someone to receive it on the first application, right? So bear that in mind. I mean, it's all part of the process to be rejected and then to refine your narrative accordingly. And then also it really has to do in many cases with who your competition is, right? I mean, he did mention in the past that there are categories like the arts and humanities that have really a superabundance of applicants in any given year. And so they're extremely competitive. Whereas he said, categories like economics, for example, really have not had a strong number of applicants in recent years, so they tend to be less competitive. So, thanks.
Thank you, Marco. We will now stop the recording and open up the floor for Q&A.